Hello and welcome to the concluding review of the final four episodes of Kemi Adetiba's To Kill a Monkey, which is currently showing on Netflix. If you have not seen my first review for the first four episodes, it should be currently showing somewhere on your screen, so I recommend you watch that first. Previously, I had made the mistake of calling Evie Efe Nosa's cousin. Apparently, she's his daughter from, I think, his first wife or girlfriend or partner. I'm not sure. It's not really made clear in the first few episodes. And I'm not even sure how wife's cousin entered my mind. I think we are only sure that Evie is Efe's daughter around episode 5. Yeah, she calls him daddy when she first arrives in episode 2, but she sounded more like a distant relative or like a mate than his daughter. So apologies for jumping the gun. I had not seen the last four episodes when I made the first review. As it turns out, if he later discovers that Obuz is sleeping with his daughter, when she somehow calls him while she was with Obuz, I'm not really sure how that accident occurred, and we are not even giving more clarity on it. But apparently, she has one hand on Obuzi's genitals and maybe the other on her phone. I don't know. It just sounded very unlikely and like such a cop out for the writer. They just wanted to show us something without actually walking through it. That's what they should have built up instead of all that time wasting with Crazy Mo. So remember that Miss Sparkles, the Delta soap looking babe that at the club that Obos came up against a few episodes ago. Well, for some reason, Efe took a liking to her. So he begins cheating on his wife by first negotiating with this lady who also turns out to be a prostitute. This strongly reminds me of that scene in Catch Me If You Can, where Leonardo DiCaprio was wooing a woman until he finds out during the convo that she's a prostitute, right? I believe this scene was based on that one. It just had such strong correlation. I found it a bit funny that if he ended up later sending flowers to a Ron's girl, when she should have just sent her invoice from the beginning so that they will not bore me with this her slow, drawling speech. So if he pays her seven figures and they spent the night together after his wife chased him out of the house because his public fight with Obuz was being streamed to IG live and she saw the girl in the video. If I pay you seven figures for a night, let's say 7 million, and I still see your shoe visible outside like a poor person, me and you we are going to put leg in the same trouser. How come they were even wearing their clothes by the time they woke up? They ended up even telling themselves that morning, there's no place I'd rather be. That kind of talk better be included in the 7 million naira package. Because if I paid you 7 million for a night, where else did you want to rather be before? We are good. Unless you want to return the money, this is basically marriage without a ring until our blood just turns to engine oil. I'm not a Nepo baby sha, so I don't know how to leave my change for person hand. It was such a weird and somehow funny storyline to me in general. He even took her on dates. Like he was even saying things like I'm myself when I'm around you. A yahoo yahoo clown. Crazy Mo's storyline even became more crazy. For some reason, Mo had never heard of or seen Obos before, even though she was clearly watching him on his IG post, which was filmed directly from Efe's daughter's birthday. She had also watched Efe and Obos nearly come to blows online at the restaurant. That her friend, the other inspector, had shown her the thing. So it's crazy to me that she could not even recognize him. For someone who works in crime investigation, she's really bad at connecting the dots. In fact, everybody in that office is just bad at investigation and corporate governance. At some point, she chose to investigate Obosi's fraud school, I think, on her own. But then she was caught and she was released. It was such a weird rubbish thing. So she went to investigate. She was caught and maybe knocked out because she has no memory of the event. Her video evidence was deleted from her phone, and then she was gently taken home and tucked into her bed with no memory of what happened, which was wild because those Obos and his goons look like people who would tuck you neatly into bed. And for what reason would this happen? Of course, it's to keep her alive so that she can end up discovering them later in the movie. She had no evidence that she could present, so she could have easily have been killed. She was suspected in the apparent murder of a jailed snitch, but the very next scene, they basically just acquitted her because they simply checked the cameras and saw that he was still alive when she left him in his cell. I don't get. You didn't check the camera before you accused her. She was then suspended, but kept coming to the office to still be arguing with her boss, Ireti Doyle. Unless all of this happened on the same day, in which case that was just bad writing. Unfortunately, they just wasted our time with our storyline in the first four episodes because they had to rush through it so fast in the last four that I didn't even buy any of the investigation angle at all. You just know that maybe the writer did not research anything about how this thing might work, or maybe doesn't know anything about tech. For someone whose job is to investigate cyber fraud, she did very little of cyber anything. Efe Obozi's nemesis goes on a rampage, killing Nosa's mom while Obozi's wife Idia narrowly escapes death thanks to her long fingernails. I laughed, I chuckled a bit at that scene because I didn't know it would happen when I mentioned in my first review that her eyes were probably only good for stabbing people's eyes out. There was a whole unlikely thing where Oboz kidnaps the father of the teacher, who is himself already a grandfather. So, how old is the guy? And if he had to confront him in order to free the guy, which resulted in a violent standoff, I really, really love that scene. I thought it was fantastic, even though I think it was also a bit too long. I especially like when Obos drew Efe's attention to the 33 million naira Rolex on his wrist. When Efemini mentioned that he was not a bad person, that he just wanted to take care of his family. That whole sequence was beautifully shot with a really good but maybe not very tight script. By episode 7, Chidi Mokeme, who is a cannibal for some reason, had completely forgotten that he was supposed to be an old man and he was just playing the same old erratic, crazy self. I really don't get why he was cast as a grandfather. It really didn't add anything to this story. Why did they not just make him a father of a teenage girl so that all this stuff would even be more believable? Out of fear for his family's safety, if he ends up betraying his friend unto death, unfortunately, at the request of the teacher, the teacher then blackmails him with the evidence of the murder and then begins to ask for 80% tax instead of 30%. Now, in these last two episodes, you begin to see that the story is flying off the rails with some crazy talk like this and weird actions and reactions from everyone involved. Like they just rushed through it. And if I'm going to give you 80% tax on something, then could just kill me because, like, what's the point? There's there was also this police inspector general who talks with his eyes, nose, mouth, cheeks, upper lip, lower lip, eyebrows, and forehead because I honestly didn't know where to focus on when he was talking. For some reason, Crazy Mo could not connect the fact that Obuz was killed at the restaurant that Efemini used to work. It's crazy. Nobody does any police work in this movie. One funny thing about Obuzi's death was that he was being shot at by like what, maybe 10 men, and some of them had assault rifles. I was expecting that by the time they were done unloading on him, he would look like either Swiss cheese or like a big rice sieve just full of holes. But nope, nope. Some of the clothes were even clean in some places. I was quite surprised. Under that hail of bullets, he should have just been chopped up into pieces all over the floor. So, if a mad at his betrayal of Obos and the final blackmail from the teacher, attempts to escape the country without his girlfriend, which is a little weird since she had been his rock so far, and he really, really, seemed to like her. He favored his wife instead, and predictably, we discovered that his wife was receiving, let us call it, massive injections from her doctor. So that was that about that. In the final confrontation, Crazy Mo ends up arresting Efemini just before he escapes the country in his private jet. Note, please just note, she really did nothing to get this guy. Miss Sparkles, the prostitute, just sent all the evidence to her because if broke her heart by trying to escape without her. All those plenty scenes with Mo could have just been replaced with more interesting stuff, it seems, because her own story arc was inconsequential in the end. The final 10 minutes of the final episode could have just been like one full episode because they just crammed a lot of stuff inside it. I nearly had whiplash and I could not follow some of the hasty logic, including that of the snitch inspector killing the suspect in his cell. But the saving grace was the very beautiful soundtrack that was guiding us through it all. But still, it was an awful lot of story. Kemi Adetiba meant to leave us with a cliffhanger, but since this entire movie is being narrated, well, dead men tell no tales. So yeah, that's the end of my review for To Kill a Monkey. Alright, then let's talk about the actual thing as a whole. As you can tell, I was pretty disappointed with Mo's storyline. Mo had mentioned earlier on that she did some certifications while she was doing the mental health therapy thing to keep herself sharp. It could have been possible that they had written those certifications to be related to AI or something that could have made it easy for her to maybe start to identify the deep fakes or the AI stuff that Ife was using to do the scams, and then maybe more organically bring them together. For the story itself, you begin episode one, rooting for Ife, but by episode six, you are like, is this person okay at all? I really like the well scripted descent into stupidity of Ife and Obuz. Honestly, these two actors were at the top of their game in this series. I thought it was fantastic. It felt like I was watching one of all those South African series, especially because of the cinematography at some point, especially that torture scene. I really, really liked it. Aside the cinematography, it gave me a lot to think about on the subject of money and power and basically the limits of what is enough. There was this singular thread of the women in this show suddenly developing moral fiber and consciences after years of partaking in blood money, and it just reminded me something of what men face in society. I'm talking of issues that are usually painted white and black on Twitter. Yeah, it's not all about money, but inflation is like 40% a year, so pick your poison pill. Talking about I loved you more when we were poor. Would you have loved him more when your poverty would have meant you being too hungry to produce milk for your twins and watching them die from malnutrition or complications? Would you have loved him more when his daughter became a harlot to make ends meet because there was no food at home and everybody wants to sleep with her? Would your love have blossomed when you were backing twins and sleeping under bridges in the cold because there was no money for rent? Like, it's always after you are tired of driving the Bentley for 5 years that you remember that your husband is immoral. It's just exactly like the point of view of a person who eats meat but hates hunters because they have guns and are therefore violent. Moving on, as someone said in the comment section, there are many Chekhov guns peppered throughout the series, and they used it very well. Seemingly useless things in the starting episode made sense towards the end. I loved it. I loved it so much. I just really wish that we actually knew what went on in their business, or even what if his legitimate business was actually all about. For the music, I thought it was fantastic. Like I've mentioned, it's like the greatest part of this stuff. It was really, really, really nice to listen to. There were some things that fascinated me in this thing. Like I am fascinated. Why did this painter decide to write this sign on this bus like this? Did the person not see all the space below? Why basically write it almost on the window itself? I just thought that was weird when I saw it. Then there was also the fact that Efe could not even make this thing more interesting by blaming AI or deepfake for the murder scene, as they call back to his talent with computers, which again they never bothered to show us. Then there's the fact that if he wanted to abandon Miss Sparkles, who got him hooked on drugs, in order to escape with his wife, whom he can barely stand. I can even understand escaping with his kids, but the wife, man has come, sha. Oh yeah, before I sign off, yeah, I do have to rate the movie. If I wanted to rate this movie, I would give it over five. I would give it a 4.7. Yep, I thought it was pretty good. There was a lot of stuff that was left in the air, but it just so turns out that the series is much much greater than the sum of its parts, so I really appreciate it. It was very interesting to watch. It was riveting, it was engaging. There were many plot holes but nothing that took away from my enjoyment in general. At many points I felt actual tension, so I think yeah, it was pretty good. 4/7 should do just fine. If you enjoyed this review, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter, Equi Reviews. I would really appreciate that. All right, see you on the next one.